Hey, how's it going? And welcome to episode number 2 of the David Lovejoy Guitar Podcast. New episodes are going to be uploaded every Sunday at 6 p.m. UK time, so keep an eye out for those. Today's podcast is all about how to make a living teaching guitar. So seeing as this is what I do, I've been doing it for the last few years, I figured that I'd be qualified to show you how to do so, and hopefully this helps out. I'll be breaking down this podcast into 2 sections, so how to acquire your students and then how to keep your students. But before we get started, I would like to talk about the podcast sponsor real quick, DistroKid. If you're a musician wanting to get your music on Spotify, iTunes, Amazon, Google, Tidal and a ton more platforms, then DistroKid has you covered. At only $19.99, so $19.99 per year, you can upload unlimited songs and albums, and you get to keep 100% of your royalties. I use it myself to upload my band's music, and I really love it. It's super simple to use, even if you've never uploaded music to these platforms before. At $19.99 per year, it's an absolute steal, and to make the deal even sweeter, if you head to my specific link, you'll get 7% off. So my link is distrokid.com/VIP/David Lovejoy. Right, let's get started with the podcast. So the first section, how to acquire students. Now, the way I go about getting students is using the most possible avenues for advertising. So let me go over the ones that I use. So first of all, I use posters. So I put posters around the town centre, anywhere locally where I can just put up posters. It's a really great way of getting students. Probably nearly half of my students that I've acquired have mentioned to me that they found me through my posters, including my more dedicated students. So it is definitely worth doing. You may think in an age of social media that maybe just posting on Facebook and doing ads online might be the best idea, but not when you've got a local business. I think it's free to do and it's quite simple to set up. So what should you include on your posters? Obviously you should include your contact info, so your email address and social media and your phone number. I like to make my posters a really bright yellow so it grabs people's attention, and also I like to list a few of the benefits of taking guitar lessons with me, so just to ease some of the objections that some potential students may have. I like to say that I'm really patient and my lessons are fun, but then also list some of the benefits of taking lessons. So things like, you'll be able to pick up a guitar at a party and show off to your friends, things like that. Think of some scenarios that potential students might find themselves in where they can put their guitar lessons into use and sell them on that. Also, in really big letters, I'd say free first lesson. That entices people because everyone wants to get something for free, and also it's a risk-free kind of way of having a lesson with you and then seeing if you get on with each other, and people are more willing to take lessons with you if they don't have to invest straight away. Now, we're going to be talking about a free lesson in a bit more detail later on in the podcast, so keep listening for that. So another way you can advertise and acquire students is by listing yourself on Google. Obviously, it's the biggest search engine in the world, and people are going to search for guitar lessons near me. So it'd be stupid not to have yourself listed on Google as a guitar teacher in your particular town. I like to use the Facebook Marketplace as well. Any local selling pages, just add yourself to every single one of them, post an ad and have a little picture there so people can see you, like in a gig or looking happy teaching guitar. It's a really good way of acquiring students as well. If you're in the UK, there's a website called Tutorful. It's not the best way of acquiring students, but I have acquired students through it. Potential students will post an advert saying that they're looking for a teacher and you can reply to them, but usually there's a really big imbalance of teachers to students, there's like 10 times the amount of teachers than there are students. So if you're not really super quick, then the student will probably go with another teacher. So I don't think it's the best way, but it's worth having just in case. I also have my YouTube channel. This is not specifically a direct way of getting students, it's more of an indirect way of getting students, just because people are going to research you if they're thinking about taking guitar lessons with you, and having my YouTube channel shows that I know what I'm talking about, and as my subscribers grow, people think it's more of a big deal to get lessons with me as well, so they'll feel like I'm more qualified to teach them. Also, word of mouth. Let everyone know that you do lessons, all your friends, all your family, and tell students that you acquire to pass the word on. I've also got a lot of students from word of mouth. And another thing to do is make sure you get a load of reviews. Social proof is a really important thing. Imagine going on Amazon, whenever you go buy a product. I don't know about you, but when I go and look for a product on Amazon, the first thing I go and check is the reviews to see if it's got good reviews. If a product has really bad reviews, I'm not going to bother even like thinking about buying it. So make sure you get lots of reviews from people, make sure they're all positive. Obviously, don't ask for a positive review, just ask for a review, and generally people give good reviews. So I said about a free first lesson. So you want to, when you get in contact with a potential student through one of these methods, you're going to offer them a free lesson. You want to avoid talking about prices until the end of the first free lesson. I'm going to talk about this later, but the main priority of your phone call or your emails with the potential student is to get them booked up for a free lesson. So make that the first priority when talking to them. During this first free lesson, you'll deliver as much value as possible, so teach them as much as you can. If they're a complete beginner, send them away being able to play a new song. What I usually teach is Chasing Cars by Snow Patrol and White Stripes, Seven Nation Army. I use those songs because they're really easy to play, even if you've never touched a guitar before. I have a little PowerPoint presentation as well that goes over the basics, and I run them through that at the beginning of the lesson. What I like to do as well is set up a Google Drive folder for your student, where you can upload all the resources from the lesson and future lessons, and they can go back and look at the Google Drive folder as they progress in lessons with you. I also put practice routines in there, so there's no ambiguity to what your student needs to practice to improve. At the end of that first free lesson, that's when you would discuss your pricing options. We'll talk about that a little bit more in detail later. So that's how you get students and how you acquire students, but you need to be able to maintain your students, to keep them around. So I'm going to tell you a couple of things you should do and a couple of things you should not do. So you want to have a structured curriculum or syllabus, just a system in place for teaching your students and baby stepping them from beginner to intermediate to advanced and so on. It's super, super important. I find that this is the best way of keeping students because they've constantly got things to keep aiming for. If you're just teaching them songs, then it's good, it's fun, but it kind of wears off quickly, and students can just learn songs in their own time as well. The point of them having lessons is you know what they need to learn to progress, and you should be teaching them in a structured manner. I always say to my students that I'm teaching them the skills that enable them to learn songs outside of lessons. I do teach songs in lessons sometimes, but my main focus is building up their skills as a guitar player. Now, you want to also add as much value to your lessons as possible. You want to make the lesson as much of a pleasant, beautiful, amazing experience for the student. You've got to think of as many different ways as possible to do this. Goes without saying, make sure your place is tidy and smells nice. Offer your students a drink. What I do sometimes is I load up my fridge with like all different types of drinks, beers, different types of cans. I have all these different nice teas and coffees. So whenever a student arrives, they have a nice choice. If the student's a little kid, you can offer them rewards. So there was one student I had who was a massive fan of Pokemon cards, and I remembered I had a massive collection of Pokemon cards. So what I would do is at the end of the lesson, if he's done really well, then I'd give him a choice of Pokemon cards to pick from, and he'd get to choose and go home with a Pokemon card at the end of the lesson. I mentioned this before, have a Google Drive folder where you can put everything into for your student, all the resources from the lessons, chord shapes, guitar tabs, and put in a Google Docs document for their practice routine and what they need to go over. A really important part of guitar lessons, and this is something that is a big mistake I've made in the past, and it's cost me a few students, and I really regret doing this because one, these students may not want to go back to guitar, but that was right at the beginning. Now I've got this sorted out, I don't do this anymore. And it is, you want to keep your lessons really simple. Make sure that every step of the way the student understands everything that you're telling them. I often say to the point of like where it's excessive, do you understand what I'm saying? Do you understand what I'm saying? I used to go at too quick of a pace, expecting them to just know certain things that I took for granted. It's better to be too simple, and then you can add things onto it, as opposed to the student not knowing what you're talking about and then confusing them and turning the lesson into a bad experience for them. Remember, the most important thing here is making the experience for the student as pleasant as possible. So break things down into their simplest form. So, for example, if there's a strumming pattern that uses 16th notes, first of all, you want to break that into quarter notes, then build it up to like 8th notes, and then build it up into 16th notes, like baby step into things that you want to teach. That's the best way to do things. Another thing you should be doing is planning lessons in advance. Every Monday, I get a basic plan together for each lesson of the week. It might change, the plan could change, but if you have a plan in place, then you don't need to wonder what needs to be taught. If the student blasts through your plan in like half a lesson, you don't need to worry as well, because you've got a structured system in place. So you just take them along the next step of that structured system. Being organised as a guitar teacher is very important. So making sure you've planned your lessons in advance in conjunction with having that structured system is really, really good. One more thing you should do is encourage students to pay for a block of lessons. When a student has lots of lessons booked, they're not going to cancel them. The rate of cancellations increases when people are paying as they go. But if someone has paid in advance, they're not going to want to waste their money. So that's something else you should do. So there's a couple of things that you should not do as a guitar teacher, and this is what we talked about earlier, and that is telling your students your prices before you have a lesson with them. So we spoke about this before. When you have a phone call or your first email conversation with a student, if you tell them your prices, they're going to judge your lessons based purely on the price of the lessons and not the actual value that you're delivering to them in the lessons. So you want to make sure you're delivering that value to them first before they hear your price. Here's an extreme example, just so you really get this. So say I had a new potential student interested in taking lessons with me, and they asked me, how much is your guitar lesson? And I said, oh, it's £100 per lesson. £100, maybe it's like $120, right? That student is going to go, no, thank you, goodbye. But if I said, when they ask, how much are your lessons? And I said, okay, so there's a few different options, there's a few different pricing plans. We'll talk to you about the pricing plans at the end of the first lesson, and then you arrange that first lesson. Then you deliver the best goddamn guitar lesson they've ever experienced in their life. They've never touched a guitar before, and now they're able to play the Beat It solo by Michael Jackson in their first ever guitar lesson. And then you tell them, yes, my guitar lessons are £100. They're going to be more likely to take on your guitar lessons because of the insane amount of value. Whereas if you told them at the beginning, they would have just judged based on the price that you gave them. So that's a very, very important thing to take into account. I know that's an extreme example, but I think you understand the importance of doing that. And inevitably, there are going to be some potential students who do want to hear the price straight up and they're not going to budge. Usually when you do tell them the price, then they're not interested and they weren't that serious to start off with, so don't worry about it. The last thing, and it's a big pet peeve of mine when teachers do this, is asking your students what they want to learn at the beginning of the lesson. You're the teacher, you should be the one with a lesson plan for them, you should be the one knowing what they need to learn and having a plan in place. So make sure you don't do that. Sometimes if I have a plan in place for a student, I think they might blast through it in a really quick time. So I ask them, is there anything else you might want to go over on top of that before they have the lesson? That's important, not in the lesson, but before they have the lesson. If they say nothing, that's fine because you'll have a plan in place because you're the guitar teacher. I'm recording this section after I finished the first recording of the podcast because there's one more thing that I forgot. Everything here I'm talking about, what you should do in a guitar lesson, goes 9 out of 10 times. Sometimes there's the 1 in 10 student who kind of just is using guitar lessons for therapy. They've had a really bad time, they've had a really bad day, and the last thing they want to do is like monotonously go over scales and learn new music theory and chords. Sometimes they just want to have a jam and clear their mind a little bit. So you have to be the judge and see what the right kind of lesson for the student is. This could be for one particular student, or it could be for multiple students at different times. You can usually tell if a student's had a really bad day and they're not really in the mood. You want to just kind of bring their spirits up a bit and just have a bit more of a fun lesson where there's less learning involved and it's more of a kind of fun kind of outcome for them. So those are my tips for becoming a guitar teacher, what you should do to acquire students, and what you should do and what you should not do during lessons. I hope you really enjoyed this podcast. If you did, please like and subscribe to my channel. If you're listening on YouTube, let me know what you thought in the comments, and I will catch you in the next one.